By late 1951, the front lines of the war had stabilized along the 38th parallel, leading to something like the trench warfare of the First World War. In November, soldiers from the Royal Canadian Regiment, the Royal 22nd, or Vandues, and the Princess Patricia's Light Canadian Infantry were deployed to a portion of the American front line. They took up position at Hill 355, which was only 40 kilometers north of Sewell and was of strategic importance because of its commanding position around the surrounding area.
The battles over Hills 355 and 187 were significant as they represented new phases of the Korean War. The first battle of Hill 355 in November 1951 was arguably the most important of the three battles for the overall course of the war in that section of the UN's defensive line. It was in effect the 22nd Regiment's Kapyeong, a 4-day intensive battle during which time a single platoon, stuck between the hammer and anvil of attacking Chinese forces, held the line, supported by mortar and artillery fire until the wave of the offensive broke and American forces were able to recapture Little Gibraltar.
The Canadians had just taken up position when they were the object of intense Chinese artillery fire, followed by a ground assault. The American troops fell back, and the Canadians were surrounded, but held the hill until the Americans regrouped and relieved them. The Canadians had prevented the loss of a major strategic position.
The second Battle of Hill 355 and the Battle of Hill 187 the following year were for different stakes, but had their own grave consequences. The October 1952 battle for Hill 355 was a major show of Chinese strength, particularly through massive artillery fires, and a canny attack that bypassed many of the Canadian defenses. The Canadians were able to hold on, some having to have laid dead while the Chinese bypassed them so they could get out their wounded and link up with survivors. But the night resulted in the first major capture of Canadian prisoners of war and a bloody nose for the Royal Canadian Regiment.
In May 1953, troops from the Royal Canadian Regiment were deployed to Hill 187, which was on the front lines, but where the defenses had badly deteriorated. Before the defenses could be repaired, the Chinese attacked, forcing the Canadians to fall back to their bunkers. At one point, the Canadians called in Allied artillery fire on their own positions, which the Chinese had occupied. When the Chinese retreated, the Canadians retook the hill. This was one of the last battles before the armistice was concluded, and once again the Canadians had held the line under heavy attack and prevented an enemy breakthrough.